This is Note Taker 19 on bacteria. Bacteria are the first two kingdoms of life that we're going to be talking about. The beginning of the Note Taker, we will be discussing what the structure and shapes of bacteria are. At the end of the Note Taker, I will talk about the two kingdoms that we separate bacteria into. Now, bacteria are our first type of life that we are going to study. They're extremely simple. They are made of only one cell, so they're unicellular, and they are something called a prokaryote. A prokaryote, if you reference the word wall in class, pro means before, karyon means nucleus. So a bacteria that is a prokaryote, which means before a nucleus, so they do not have a true nucleus in their cell. They actually have a little circular strand of genetic material that floats around with no nucleus for protection. Now with our bacteria, they can come in three different shapes. Spherical, which means round like a ball, those bacteria are called cocci. And if you look at the letter O in the word cocci, that will help you remember that they are round like a ball. Rod-shaped bacteria are called bacilli. And if you look at the ILLI in bacilli, they are rods. So that's a good way to remember that bacilli means rod-shaped. And the last type of bacteria are called spirilla. And if you can look at the beginning of that word, you'll see the word spiral, and that's what these bacteria look like. In class, we'll actually be looking at more pictures that have these shapes. Now, the word that you see at the top of this slide, which is bacterium, that is one single bacteria. Bacterium is singular, bacteria is actually plural. Now, each bacterium is one single cell. It does have a cell wall for support and protection. That's part of the cell we learned back in first 9 weeks. Inside that cell wall, there is a cell membrane. This is like that bodyguard for the cell. It controls what enters and leaves the cell. Inside the cell, you will find cytoplasm. But unlike the animal and plant cells that we did study first 9 weeks, the genetic material in a bacteria is not surrounded by a nucleus. It actually has one single circular chromosome that just floats around inside. You can see the picture of the bacteria at the bottom of the slide. Okay. Now, on the picture that you saw in the last slide, you may have seen the structure that looked like a tail. This is actually called a flagella, and it's a whip-like tail, and it's used to propel the bacteria, help it swim around in a watery environment. Other bacteria that don't have flagella have to rely on other means to get to where they need to be. Some rely on the air, some rely on the water to carry them there, some stick to things like your clothing and your skin to be carried from one place to the next. And with our bacteria, they can inhabit or live in a wide range of environments. Most of bacteria live in areas where there is oxygen. These bacteria are called aerobes. And again, if you reference the word wall in the classroom, the prefix air, A-E-R, actually means air. Now, they use this oxygen for respiration. So they take in the oxygen through diffusion through their cell membrane, and they utilize this to break down the energy or the sugars and food molecules to get their energy. However, there are some bacteria that when they are exposed to oxygen, it actually kills them. So they're going to live in more extreme environments where there is lower concentration of oxygen. Now, these bacteria are called anaerobes, and again, on the word wall, the prefix an means without. So anaerobes need to live in an environment without oxygen. Up at the top of this slide, there's a picture. This is a petri dish, and a petri dish is something that we can use to grow bacteria to study them. Now, because a petri dish is not completely closed off, oxygen is actually able to reach these bacteria. So when we're growing bacteria on a petri dish, they are going to be aerobic bacteria because oxygen can get to them. The bottom picture, however, is something maybe a little morbid for some of y'all, but this is some scientists doing a autopsy on a dead whale to see what could have killed it. And what you're seeing in the main part of the picture are the whale's intestines. And towards the kind of bottom right of the picture, you'll notice that the intestines are a darker color. And this is caused by the release of gas from the anaerobic bacteria that live inside the intestines. Now, bacteria. To be able to get their energy, there are two ways depending on what type of bacteria it is. So some bacteria are what we call heterotrophs. Hetero on the wall means different, and if you look for trophos on the wall, you'll see that means feeder. So a heterotroph, that word means different feeder. It means that they must get their energy by eating something, so they need a different source to go to for their food. Some bacteria, some of those heterotrophs actually feed off of living organisms. If you've ever heard of the flesh-eating bacteria, that's one of these. If it is something that feeds off of a living organism and harms them or hurts them in any way, then those type of bacteria we consider parasites. Now, if you don't need to go somewhere to get your food and can make your food on your own, then you are called an autotroph. Auto means self, trophos means feeder, and there are some bacteria that can actually make their own food just like plant cells can do. Now, with the words anaerobe, aerobe, prokaryote, heterotroph, and autotroph, we're seeing a lot of new vocabulary, so definitely use the word wall in class to help you out with these when we're doing work. Now, reproduction in bacteria. Most of your bacteria reproduce by a process called binary fission. Binary fission is going to produce two cells with genetic material that is identical to the parent cell. Now, binary fission works a lot like mitosis that we learned first 9 weeks. However, the definition for mitosis is the division of the nucleus. And since a bacteria doesn't have a nucleus, we had to give its division a different name. We could not call it mitosis. Now, other bacteria can actually do a process called conjugation. They can actually line up next to each other, form a tube from one bacteria to the other, and they can swap some DNA, so they can actually change their genetic code. This is something bacteria will do when they feel threatened in their environment. They'll try to change their genetic code so that they have a better chance of survival. This section of the notes is going to talk about how bacteria interacts with other things in our environment. Now, some are used to break down dead material, so they will be called decomposers. They will actually feed off of something that's dead and get its energy that way. Your decomposers, we will talk more about other decomposers through this third 9 weeks, and you'll hear the word decomposers mentioned again fourth 9 weeks when we talk about food chains. Now, some bacteria actually produce oxygen. So those that actually are autotrophs that make their own food release oxygen into the air, and that millions and millions and millions of years ago is what helped to change our Earth's atmosphere so our oxygen-breathing creatures could actually evolve. Some bacteria actually change our environment. Some can actually grow on rocks and cause the rock to break down. That then will become a form of soil which plants can grow in, and these plants can become homes or food for other small animals and fungus. There are some bacteria that will help organisms by forming a type of partnership called symbiosis. Symbiosis is a partnership between two living things that are not the same. So you can't have symbiosis between two of the same things. So a human and a human would not have a symbiotic relationship. But there are some food-making bacteria that actually live in the bodies of some of our sea creatures and provide them nutrients. The bacteria actually are protected by that sea creature, their host, and in return provide the host with food. So this is a good relationship. Both the bacteria and the sea creature are benefiting from it. There are also nitrogen-fixing bacteria. Nitrogen is something that your plants need to grow, but not all plants are great at getting nitrogen from the soil. So sometimes these bacteria will grow on the roots of plants and help them get the nitrogen that they need to grow. Now, I don't want you to think that, so far everything I've told you about bacteria sounds pretty good. I don't want you to forget that there are also some bad bacteria out there. We're going to talk about those a little later. But some bacteria can cause your food to spoil. They cause food poisoning. There are others that can cause disease such as pneumonia, tetanus, Lyme disease. So, even though I'm giving you some helpful ways, there are some bacteria out there that are bad. Here in these pictures, the top left picture is showing a tree that had fallen, so it's a log in the forest, and you can see that it's really broken down. It's your decomposers, some of them have been bacteria, some are probably fungus on here, but your decomposers have helped to break this wood down and will return nutrients to the soil so that new plants can grow. The bottom picture is a magnified view of the roots of plants, and the little nodules or groups that are growing on these roots are actually nitrogen-fixing bacteria that will help these plants grow. Some other good uses for bacteria, we have quite a few food products that use bacteria in the making of the products. Actually, yogurt, if you were to look at the container of yogurt, you might see a statement that says contains live cultures of, and then you'll see a funny name there. That funny name is the scientific name for certain bacteria that they use to make the yogurt. Cheeses are made using bacteria, sour cream, and on the next slide I will actually show you even more food. Some bacteria help you digest food. We have anaerobic bacteria living in our intestines that help us digest. We also have some bacteria that help us to make vitamins. Some bacteria are used to make chemicals called antibiotics that can destroy or weaken other bad bacteria that may be making us sick. Bacteria is sometimes used in nature to break down oil from oil spills. We can make pesticides. We can make plastics using bacteria. Some are used in industry for tanning leather and extracting valuable metals from rock. So again, all these are good ways we use bacteria. Here are some of your foods that are made using bacteria in the process. Up at the top left, we have Swiss cheese. Actually, the holes that are in the Swiss cheese are from the gases that the bacteria give off, forming these little air pockets. The top right, we see sausages hanging. And then across the bottom, we have yogurt, we have apple cider vinegar, we have sour cream, and in the bottom right we have sauerkraut. So if you've ever eaten any of these foods, you have eaten something that either contains bacteria or has used bacteria in the making of it. In this section of the notes, I'm going to break down our bacteria in its two kingdoms. In 1983, scientists took a sample of the sediment from the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, and they actually discovered little tiny organisms in the sample, and they realized that this was a type of bacteria that existed even before the dinosaurs did. So they named these type of bacteria Archaebacteria. So that's the name of the kingdom Archaebacteria. And archae means ancient. You can see that on the word wall. Archaebacteria are going to belong to the domain Archaea, and we're going to break them into three types. We're going to break them into methanogens, thermophiles, and halophiles. Now your methanogens are going to be anaerobic bacteria, so ones that do not like oxygen, and they actually give off a methane as a byproduct. And you can find methanogens living in places such as sewer treatment plants, you can find them in swamps and bogs, and you can find methanogens in your intestines. Actually, your methanogens play a very important role. They help you digest your food. The more or the harder it is for them to digest your food, things like your broccolis and your onions and beans and things like that, the harder they have to work, the more gas they do produce. And methanogens are what make us pass gas or fart, because they're producing a gas as they work to help us digest our food. Your thermophiles, if you look at the word wall, thermo means heat, phile means lover. A thermophile are going to be your heat-loving bacteria. They're going to be found in the hottest springs and the vents that release the volcanic gases that are superheated under the ocean. They love it here. These are areas, however, where other life cannot live. Halophiles, halo means salt, again, phile means lover, so these are your salt lovers. They're going to be found in the saltiest salt water on Earth. They're, again, other environments where other living things can't live because it's just too extreme of an environment for it. Now, the next section I talk about with Archaebacteria, we do sometimes use it to break down garbage, so it's not just helping us digest in our intestines, but we can use it to help break down garbage, and it will release methane, which we can use as a fuel source. We have blue-green bacteria called cyanobacteria that we also use for the production of petroleum, which is another fuel source. These pictures represent our three types of Archaebacteria. Now, the first one in the top left is kind of a little joke about methanogens. You see that the woolly mammoth there had passed gas, and when you put the gas with flame, it does make quite the mess. But methanogens do live in the intestines and do help us digest and do produce a gas as a byproduct that does need to be released from our body. The top right picture are our thermophiles. This is an underwater vent, a volcanic vent that has gas escaping, and that does superheat the water around there. And the only thing that can really live in this area is life or forms of life that can tolerate that super high temperature. Thermophiles are one of the few things that can actually live there. Halophiles, this is a picture of a salt field, where this would be completely uninhabitable by any other life form because there's nothing there. Halophiles would actually thrive in an environment like this. The other kingdom of bacteria would be called our eubacteria. Eu, if you look on the word wall, means true. So that's where they give this name to our more not the ancient bacteria, but our more modern day bacteria. Eubacteria are going to belong to the domain bacteria. This type of bacteria does not like extreme environments. They like a very simple, easy environment to live on. A lot of times they'll live in or on our body. Not all of them are harmful to you, but some can actually be. Some can actually help you from getting sick. Others help keep the oxygen level in our environment where it needs to be. But there are some that do make you sick. So kind of rule of thumb, one way that we're going to look at this when we look at the list in class, a good way to remember the eubacteria versus the archaebacteria. A lot of our eubacteria make you sick, so that's a good way to remember they belong into the kingdom Eubacteria. And we're going to be talking about the diseases in class, and you're going to be doing an activity with them. But we have things like Streptococci, which causes strep throat, Borrelia burgdorferi, which causes Lyme disease, Escherichia coli, also known as E. coli, which causes intestinal distress for us. These are just a few of the eubacteria that we're going to see in class. Now, with our archaebacteria and our eubacteria, we have both autotrophic, making their own food like a plant cell, and we have heterotrophic bacteria, the ones that need to find food. Both kingdoms of bacteria have members that can be autotrophs or heterotrophs. Please don't forget to complete the assessment that follows the video.